Welcome to Midlands Mentors. It's the podcast that shines a spotlight on the leaders shaping the future of marketing, digital and e-commerce across the Midlands. Today, we're joined by Gareth Dunn, Marketing Director at Veolia, a global leader in environmental solutions. Gareth, thanks for joining us.
Oh, good to see you.
Excellent. Gareth, let's take a little bit of a step back into your journey and how it all began. You attended Keele University in Staffordshire and then thought, let's get into marketing.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a gap between the two things. But when I went to university, and that was in Keele. And at the time, I chose a psychology degree, which in the kind of the late 90s, early thousands sounded dead interesting to me at the time. And I'd probably have to say, unlike maybe some of the young marketers coming into industry now, I didn't put a huge amount of forethought into what sort of 20, 30 years looked like. But I thought psychology and pretty sounded really interesting. So I did that, had a great time at uni, came out of uni, and then faced a bit of okay, now what do I do moment? So I started doing I started working office jobs, etc. And whilst I've kind of took stock of that degree and what it gave me, and psychology is quite data rich. So there's kind of plenty of analysis. It's about human behavior. It's about how you get human behavior. So when I took a kind of a dispassionate view of that and how can I actually use this to get a job now, marketing as a profession was one of the things that popped down quite early on in terms of commercialization of that skill set. So I set my targets on marketing, but it's fair to say I also spent probably 6 or 7 years in the job world doing analytical roles. And prior to kind of getting into marketing in its own right, I had a couple of bites of the cherry as well. I had a couple of offers to get into marketing, but I waited for the right job for me. A couple of them weren't quite right. So yeah, it wasn't a linear path, but it's definitely been a rewarding one.
And you're quite right, because you were at British Gypsum in a variety of more analytical roles before, that right role in marketing sort of opened up. Talk to us about that experience, because obviously you kind of knew that marketing was something that you wanted to do, but like you said, you didn't want to just rush into that decision. You wanted to wait for that right one. Talk us through. That's a test of patience, right? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think probably the first thing is that especially when you're younger and you're at the beginning of your career, time can move quite quickly. So there's definitely an element of, you get into your 20s and you realize, well, I've been doing this for 5 years now, 6 years now, and where am I actually going and what am I doing? So there's definitely an element of that in my very early career where, you enjoy life outside of work, you're still young, you still, you've got the world at your feet, so to speak. But I landed in a job in an analytical capacity, and I was rewarded with a bit of progression, a bit of development, and I was relatively comfortable, if I'm honest, so I could do the job and do well at it. And it was interesting enough. It was about sort of forecasting the commodities market and energy prices and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting to me. But yet there came a point really where things catch up with you and you maybe hit the ceiling within your existing capacity. And that was what happened with me really, is that I got to a point where I thought, I'm ready now to really push on and do something I enjoy more and I feel is delivering more on, what I've done and what I've invested in from a degree perspective. So, that early part was all about, I think it gave me a great grounding in the operational side of the business, because I initially worked in supply and operations, which was very different to marketing. But it's hugely rewarding in terms of, as a marketer, you could be able to sell your entire proposition. And sometimes the proposition is the credibility and the technical expertise of what you're part of. So that kind of empathy driven and implicit understanding of the operational side of the business really benefited me.
And then you held a variety of marketing roles, incredibly loyal to British Gypsum, which is obviously part of Saint-Gobain, as most people will know, but for those who don't, which is the major French manufacturer, as we all know. You were incredibly loyal to that business for a long time. What sort of, was it because there was opportunity to grow? Was that part of why you were so loyal, or what? Talk us through that.
I think it's all of the above. I mean, that business, British Gypsum, part of Saint-Gobain, as you said, in the UK. It is a huge organisation, huge legacy organisation as well. So British Gypsum is a brand well over 100 years now. I remember celebrating 100 years when I was there. And it gave me a lot. So a lot of training, a lot of development, and a lot of opportunities. I probably averaged a new role every 18 months to 2 years in the kind of 17 years that I was there. So I got a lot of progression and development. But also when you spend that amount of time in a business, you also build connections and understanding and a real affinity for a brand. So loyalty was reciprocal, really, in terms of the support that I got from the business, but it also built up a huge emotional connection as well. So it's very difficult to leave for that reason, because there's people that you've kind of professionally grown up around, but you build a real affinity for a business and a subject matter as well.
And some of the roles were quite strategic, right? So you've gone from, I guess, more senior marketing innovation roles, then into strategic roles. How was that jump as well?
So I think my entry into marketing began in product innovation, and I was lucky enough to be offered a role in the innovation team, which was sat within the marketing function at British Gypsum at the time. And it really gave me a sheep dip into customer insight and understanding jobs to be done and pains and gains, and really taking like a design thinking methodology to product design and solutions. And that really exposes you to customer centricity. I think how it evolved from there was an ever extending timeline of horizon of how you can use that information. So my development trajectory becoming more strategic was just the natural consequence of asking so what or why, or what do we do with this on the back of the information. So we launch a product tomorrow that we've been developing for 2 years. Well, why? Well, because it's part of a pipeline that needs to extend into 5 years. Well, what do we do after 5 years? Well, we need to look at the next 10, which is about technological trends or what's going on in the market, maybe the competitive landscape. So moving from kind of innovation into marketing, into strategy, for me felt really quite a natural linear progression, more about kind of time and horizon than it is about changing discipline. I think you actually use a lot of the core skill sets together. I still, when I'm talking to young marketers in my function now, I still use innovation methodology and innovation language quite a lot when talking to them about how to craft statements and how to really look with empathy at customers.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And then the final role was the head of propositions role. Which is, again, that's almost that next level, in terms of, both responsibility, but then also the expectation in terms of what you're creating for the business. What was the journey like in terms of being in that position, but also, the successes that you shared in that position as well? Walk us through how that all fared.
So that role was a new role, and it was, so the job title was Service Innovation Director, and service innovation was the subject matter. And this was around that product, that business sells physical products into a very physical industry. But the way that the market was evolving was an increasing need for services, an increasing need for sort of the wraparound to the physical product. And through the strategic work that we just touched on, it was really highlighting that actually there's opportunity there. And so, my responsibility and the remit that was carved out really was to develop that approach. So I got to do some really interesting things with kind of customer training or technical advice, or maybe even developing new business models. And it was really quite new for me, new for the business to be taking a view on service like that. But it was also, a consequence of natural market evolution. I think it's a market evolution that's certainly continued post my departure from BG and Saint-Gobain, is that, that industry, construction products, continues to need service and development.
Yeah, and then, when you're looking at that sort of development, there's obviously twofold pressure, right? There's commercial pressure in terms of what are people actually using and taking up and what's working out, in construction. And I guess there's also the data that you're getting in terms of, from the R&D as well, right? In terms of how was it hard juggling those expectations, both commercially, but also what you were seeing from the data from an innovation perspective?
Yeah, I think the good thing about service innovation or any kind of innovation which requires less upfront capital is that in theory you can be more agile. So there's more of an opportunity for test, learn, and iterate. Whereas if you're developing a physical product and you're in a kind of a mass manufacturer setting, being construction products or automotive or anything else, and you have to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it before you invest in the capital to kind of develop and launch a product. Whereas in service, you can afford to be a little bit iterative. So I think that worked in its favor. I think, having said that, in an industry where new ideas don't always take flight quickly, and there's an element of how do you build confidence in what you're doing as a business that you're moving in the right direction in kind of bringing new innovation to market, and without stalling because the market isn't ready for it yet. So there was a fair amount of things which were part of a future pipeline, but the market wasn't ready for it yet, or maybe we weren't ready for it yet. So a big onus on the role really was to build not only the pipeline of what those future products might look like, but also the mechanism for developing them and launching them in the first place, and how you can test and iterate and learn and understand broadly where you're going to go, but also not get too caught up in it being a linear pathway. Actually, sometimes you just need to understand what the next step's going to look like, not what the next 5 steps are going to look like.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then let's skip ahead. Let's look at the next, part of your journey, which is what I think was a really exciting part of your journey, because it also involved, some really interesting moves, both from a overall team management perspective. The size of team, grew, areas in which, came within your remit grew. Talk us through that move to Aliaxis here in the UK, which is one of the UK's leading fluid management system provider. What was that move like? Because that was for me a really interesting one, because it involved product strategy, market intelligence, brand and comms, customer training. Like, it was quite a big remit in terms of who sat within. I think it was 50 plus heads that you had initially as marketing director.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think from a career evolution perspective, people will find that sometimes stars align, or the tea leaves give you a picture at a particular time. And when I moved to Aliaxis, obviously, as we just talked about, very loyal to British Gypsum. I spent a lot of time there, growing up through the business. But it felt like, from a current career perspective, it was the beginning of a new cycle, either within that business or external. And it came at a time when an offer opened up to me to go and do something very different. And it was, marketing director position, which is the position what I saw as the next natural evolution. I think I'd arrived in a situation where I wanted to take that next step because I could see the potential for shaping the approach of a business to take in new product or new offers or new positions to market. So that's why I wanted to do it. I wanted to have that kind of more holistic opportunity to shape that. So Aliaxis was an opportunity that came up. They were looking for a marketing director with a particular skill set, which was around a kind of a technical sell, and really leaning on consultancy and being very close to a technical project. So this is still in construction products, albeit a different city. And it was an opportunity that spanned the sort of the traditional marketing mix of product management, brand and creative, but also the technical team as well. So the technical support function and customer training function, and really it was about creating more technical proposition to market. And Aliaxis, as an organisation in the UK at that time, was spanned multiple markets as well. So part of the challenge was to try and unify a single identity into multiple areas of an industry. So a broad and new challenge for me, a new company, a new culture, part of the kind of the UK exec board for the business. And it was definitely a really interesting step for me.
And then from there, you move to commercial director in the business, which is amazing. And that's, quite a big step up from a C-suite perspective, but then also, from a overall remit perspective, your team went from 50 to 90 basically overnight, right?
It was it was an interesting move. I think it wasn't one that I'd kind of gone into the opportunity looking for, and it did. I've worked quite closely with both permanent and interim commercial directors in my time when I was marketing director. I think Aliaxis was going through some change in terms of its kind of overall approach. And during that transition period, the opportunity arose to kind of widen my remit to commercial, to bring the sales organization under my remit as well. So, for the time I was commercial director looking at marketing, technical, and sales, and yes, the headcount rose. I think when you just look after marketing, you can afford to be maybe a little bit partisan in that kind of quite traditional Tom and Jerry between marketing and sales, whereas I made sure that I was equitable in my view on things. But actually, it's a great opportunity, commercial, because the interplay between sales and marketing is where success is. You can have as fancy a kind of strategic plan or brand campaign or whatever it might be as you need. But if it's not being executed and converted by an engaged and talented sales team, then it doesn't work. So
Yeah,
interesting one for sure.
was there any? I mean, thinking about the Saint-Gobain and the Aliaxis experiences, and like you said, they're sector-wise very similar in sector. What was some of the marketing innovation that came through during those years? Like, because obviously there would have been some things that came through that really worked. There have been some things that didn't work equally as well. Like, what was from a marketing perspective, what was that innovation cycle like, particularly within that sector?
So I think I'm old enough to have experienced a decent chunk of the transition from paper to digital, believe it or not. And that was more in the BG time, BG years early on, British Gypsum years, but nonetheless, I think there were some dead ends and some learnings to take from the rush, if you like, to digital. And for sure, taking more web presence and driving more traffic towards websites within the construction product sphere, it is super important to make sure the information is live and real and open and legitimate. So I think from an innovation perspective, oddly enough, it was around provision of data and reducing the number of touch points to as few as possible customers. And I think there was things that you could play with around sort of specifier tools or chatbots or but things that would improve the velocity of communication and make life simpler for a customer. I think probably some of the things that maybe had legs at the time but no longer do would be around the use of closed groups on different social media platforms.
Yeah, sure.
A wide, diffuse customer base. How do you engage them? How do you build the community out of them? We tried a load of different things across both businesses, really, in terms of building that community. Some worked, some didn't work. And I think that's partly around the changing landscape within social media and how certain platforms were used. So, yeah, I think digital is definitely the number one aspect of kind of innovation and change. I think the other thing I would say changed quite drastically, actually, and probably has continued to, is the use of live events and what that means.
Yeah.
So moving from quite a traditional model where everything was big exhibition hall based to where it was maybe smaller scale, maybe CPD seminars, lunch and learns, round tables. And then I think that I saw a transfer from quantity to quality, if that made sense.
Absolutely.
The events. And I think that's been a natural learning for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because that's not just been for, I think, the construction and material sector. It's been for a lot of sectors, right? That, and I think as well with social selling now, and how important that has been for a lot of sectors. It's almost going hand in hand where it's that quality approach versus the quantity approach, and really trying to dial in that audience, and get closer to your your target audience, and ultimately there's decision makers of who's going to buy your products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, okay, so let's look at some of this from an achievement perspective at Aliaxis. What was some of the stuff that you guys were really proud of while you were there? I appreciate your remit grew while you were there, and you touched on before getting that connection dialed between sales and marketing was one of the things that you really focused on when you stepped into the commercial director role. But was there anything there that you guys were really sort of quite proud of in terms of what you achieved?
I think in terms of achievements, you need to look at things in context of the situation at hand. And as I said, construction products as an industry has gone through some challenge in recent years. Just from an economic perspective, it's in the news as hoarding. We're at the bottom of a lull in construction, and so from an achievement perspective, a lot of it has been around how do you adapt, how do you refine you do within maybe slightly more conservative means versus previous years, where the market was more buoyant. And so I think that part of it is around how you cut your cloth accordingly. And certainly in Aliaxis, there was an element of how to really make every piece of activity the most impactful it could be, how to choose the right markets, and choose where to invest your resource and invest your focus, because you can't be everything to everyone. And I say that's probably part one of it, really, is adapting to quite adverse situation in marketing, whilst going through organizational transition as well, which came from a kind of a group wide kind of review, wide to go. But I think there was also quite kind of some nice moments in on more kind of UK basis as well. So one of the things we did was so Aliaxis as an organization has grown through acquisition. In the UK in particular, and one of its smaller brands, which is kind of no longer headline now, is a company called Europipe. And then that had its 50-year anniversary when I was there. It was really nice from an internal perspective as well as external to celebrate that brand, albeit one that wasn't the headline anymore, but kind of celebrate heritage and legacy and what that meant. And the people within the business that have been there for a big chunk of that 50 years. And they had grown up through the organization. A huge, and so it's a marketer's dream to be able to take that and make it external facing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So things like that always put a smile on my face. I'm for quite a technical, scientific marketer, I do like brand when it means something. Because for me, brand when it means something is connected to people, and we're able to do some of that, which was nice.
Absolutely. And then so where we are now, which is exciting for me, Veolia, massive business, right? It's in one of the biggest business in environmental solutions, is one of the biggest, if not, globally, right? Absolutely huge. Your remit led you back to marketing, which is fabulous. Now as obviously marketing director, was that the motivation to get back to a marketing focused role? Was that part of the motivation in the move to Veolia, was to focus on marketing, so purely marketing again? Or what was I guess where I'm going with this is, where was that motivation to make that jump across from the commercial director role?
It's definitely part of it. And I think I built up enough of a career legacy and experience to be able to look at it a bit more objectively in terms of where I want to go and what I want to be. And the opportunity to go back into more of a core marketing focus really, really appealed to. As did the opportunity to get really close to a subject which is very impactful and meaningful for the business, for the world, really. The things that we do at Veolia around decarbonisation, depollution, the focus on water security, resilience for big customers, and the connection between those things and kind of the broader environmental subject. That's something that when I saw it as an opportunity, I wasn't. It kind of wasn't something that I went looking for. It came to me, and it was something that immediately kind of switched on a light. In the same way that that kind of earlier in my career, when you really connect with subject and can get really invested in something, I quite quickly built up an affinity for the subject matter at Veolia. So Yeah, it was about getting back to marketing, but also marketing something really impactful, and also there's an element of ambition. Veolia is as framed it, a big organization, but it's a leader, and I am quite a competitive beast, and I like to be part of the winning team. And we have an ambitious purpose and process and mission at Veolia, and that really appealed to me as well.
Absolutely. And the, like you were saying there, focusing with a more marketing remit or marketing remit as such, you're when you're balancing the commercial objectives of an organization like a Veolia with the purpose-driven marketing that you're trying to achieve within sustainability, within environmental impact, how do you, that's got to be a tough juggling act, right?
I think it is, but I think it is for every marketer, whether they've realised it or not. And this is something that I try and pass on again to people coming into the trade. Really, is that marketing is about delivery. It's about results, and the sooner people get that, the sooner people can flourish in that environment. So yes, it's challenging. Because businesses have objectives, they have numbers to hit, they have budgets to hit, they have stretch goals. But a marketer's job is to build that pipeline over a number of years and propagate today for something that pays off, not just next month, but next year and the next 2 years, 3 years. So the balance really is about making sure that your progress is as explicit as possible and that what you're building gives off enough credibility, but also enough quick wins and small, like things in the here and the now to maintain credibility. But that's, businesses are a moving, changing beast as well. So priorities might shift. You might have an opportunity that pops up that you need to deploy a load of focus to. So you need to be agile and responsive to things as they change in your environment as well, whilst not losing sight of the kind of the North Star where you're moving over a 3-4 year horizon as well.
And what I find really interesting, and technology within your industry changes on a daily basis, right? There's so much change. Yeah, you're in a sector which is constantly changing, constantly evolving for the better, obviously, because we're getting more improvements within the environmental solutions that are out there, from waste management to, like decarbonisation, like you mentioned, depollution, like you mentioned. When you're operating in a place of such constant change and leading the marketing around that, how do you approach this transformation? Because I find it absolutely fascinating. Is that what's leading marketing today within the environmental sector can change rapidly tomorrow, right? It's often not probably talked about enough just how much the industry changes and how much you have to adapt with that change.
I think I'm relatively traditional in my approach, and I like to start with the macro. And I think that applies to the question that you've asked, Tim, insofar as transformation and the evolution of the market is driven by market factors. So I think the challenge for a marketer, and it's certainly the case of Veolia, is to be really across the market drivers and the trends behind them. So, and we're not just talking about tomorrow or this year. Like I said, it's about 3, 5, 10 years. Now, in a marketplace like Veolia's or marketplaces, there's definitely a heavy element of legislation and kind of legal change, and it can be tied up with what a given government at a given time might want to do, and they're bringing sort of different regulations which you need to help your customers adapt to. There's also a broader, more societal change which has an impact on consumption habits, and there's technological change, particularly in energy. It is a market which is constantly evolving, as we're seeing in the news every day. So in order to kind of facilitate transformation, for me, the core of it is to be really confident in your assessment of trends and developments in the market, be able to map them, be able to understand the impact on you, but also the critical bit for a marketing team is what's the commercialization? So what's it mean for the customer? What's the opportunity there for us?
And I find that really, really such a great point, because it's so, for me, thinking about your sector, where you're in a customer first sector, and but you've also got societal pressures. Really being so data driven around understanding your customer, it's got to be the starting point, right, for where you guys are and what you're trying to achieve within innovation in marketing at Veolia.
That's absolutely right. I think it's a unique challenge when you're in a B2B environment, because you're not only thinking about your customer, but you're thinking about your customer's customer as well, particularly if their customer is a consumer. So in some cases, whilst we're engaging in B2B marketing, it's actually B2B to C, and there's an element of thinking about who the person at the end of the chain is and what their needs are, because actually solving that is what we need to solve for our customer. But you touched on it with the word innovation there. This is where it becomes full circle for my kind of an evolution, because those ideal customer personas, those profiles, the key to it is understanding what these individuals are trying to achieve and what gets in their way and what can really delight. And if you can build your marketing methodology around understanding people on an empathetic level, and that's the key to it, is that, if your target is the head of buying in a particular kind of organization, well, you need to understand the head of buying. You need to understand what do they do. It's what's getting in their way. It could be that there's a really simple thing that you can do that could exponentially improve their day, that improves the way that you can, service them in the market. So that customer centricity and connection to an innovation mindset, that's where these two things connect.
Thinking about the skills, thinking about the mindset as a marketeer today, what sort of advice would you give around the skills, the mindset for that next generation of marketeer in the Midlands looking to, forge their career in marketing?
So I think coming from a marketing education backdrop, they're probably pretty on point when it comes to modern dialogue or tools and techniques. So young marketers now, I'd expect them to be talking about, digital tools and AI as standard, and kind of how you adapt to that to drive demand for your business. So I think in some respects, one of my initial pieces of advice would be, the thing that they need to connect the dots between is the kind of the marketing theory and staying current on that. And I would say that that's advice all of my career is stay current. Marketing, more than most professions, is changeable. Technology changes quickly, digital changes quickly, tools change quickly. So all stay current on that. But I think it's connecting the dots between your marketing theory and the business reality. And that for me is all about understanding the organization around you if you get the opportunity. Going back to my own story, I began it within a supply and operations background, albeit I spent the first sort of 7 or 8 months, I think, answering phones in a call center. So I got great customer exposure through that experience, and quite colourful baptism into the world of kind of but learn the business, learn what the different functions do, what makes them tick, what's important to them. And I think the key to unlocking success in marketing within a kind of a quite complex organization is to understand that the tension between the different functions of an organization needs to be strong in order for you to succeed. And we move away from a world of caricatures where marketing is the colouring in department, sales like to go and play golf, operations press a button in a control room. These are caricatures which aren't actually that far from what people really think if they don't invest the time to learn about the business that they're in. So I think that would definitely be the kind of the real meat of what I feel has been successful for me, is actually understanding business context. And I think in the Midlands, yes, it's not the Southeast. Yes, it's not London with all it has to offer in terms of the kind of the wealth of different industries. But Midlands actually has a really well established belt of industry. Where I base myself on a daily in Canada, there's quite a lot going on around kind of water. There are, my last 2 jobs have been in Canada, and there's no connection between the two. It's just pure coincidence. It's pure coincidence, probably not. So you've got automotive in the Midlands. You've got heavy industries like my previous company in Nottingham. So there are some really well-established businesses with massive pedigree in the Midlands where And if you can get in and develop your career through them, they will look after you because you're an asset, as long as you look after them, producing and delivering. And I think it's a difficult relationship which can work really well. And because, my experience was a long, long time growing up through a business, and that paid off big time for me. I think the trend tends to be more for shorter stints in businesses, which I think also works. But also it's very rewarding to kind of grow up through a complex organization.
No, absolutely, and it's a valid point you raise, because you've got a booming nuclear energy sector growing here in Nottinghamshire and Derby. You've got defence, you've got automotive, like you mentioned, you've got bits of fashion and retail as well. You think about Leicester and all that they've got going on down there. There are loads of different sectors within the Midlands, which, if you are based here, you're local, and you've got that desire, be it within digital, e-com or marketing, there is opportunity, and almost in just about every sector, there is opportunity. And yes, there are some parts of the Midlands which is more focused on other parts, but also, there is still a very broad sector of an opportunity. And I think it's something that, when people are finishing their degree, they're not always aware of the fact that there is all of this, on offer. And I guess, you've highlighted it you've highlighted it so well, and you see it at companies like a Boots, for example, here in Nottingham too, where you can quite literally easily spend 10 years, work in 5 or 6 different roles and get that experience to then, like you did, really catapult yourself into a senior role somewhere else, which is fabulous. I want to finish off, as I always do on the Midlands Mentors, with my last question. For you, obviously being a marketeer, we're going to focus this on marketing. What's going to push the needle next year, 2026? What's going to push the needle, do you think, in marketing?
Oh, so I think I will be highly original, and I will say AI, which will be the answer that I imagine 90% of people, but maybe come at it in an angle that is different to others. So I see AI, and in the marketing world, this is about the use of AI and how you adapt to Google search and what that means for you now, or is it use of AI from a content creation perspective, and as well as the kind of the various automation and productivity benefits that it brings. So I think all of the above will move the needle for marketing in 2026. But I think what will truly, truly impact good businesses will be authenticity in a world of AI. And that's the inflection point that we're at, where people are being faced with the crossroads. And do you go all in on AI and it's full kind of content, or do you try and strike a balance and still prioritize human engagement, human content creation, which is quite authentic? So that the balance between those two things is actually what's going to be in 2026, 27, as the dust begins to settle, because I think probably where we'll be in the next 24 months. That will be a really interesting subject for us all to look at. And because you and I are talking on the call now, where consumers of various different products and content, and do we make different judgments when we think it's human or when we think it's synthetic, to use a really. So I think that'll be the area. So unoriginal in subject, but maybe thought-provoking in content.
No, the authenticity piece is a really valid point, and I think there is so many examples already of brands which have gone, be it from any sector, I've gone all in on AI, and that has come through quite obviously, and that has then created, negative impression, be it from their consumer base or from the general public, around the use of that AI. And the balance, which you mentioned, getting that balance will be, I couldn't agree more, that's going to be part of it, because AI will help make us all efficient in so many different ways and help us get more time back for the human interaction. But how do we still stay authentic? It's a really good point. So Gareth, I really appreciate your time on the Midlands Mentors. It's been absolutely fabulous to learn about your career, and I'm really excited to obviously see where you guys go at Veolia next year with all the plans that you've got. And thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Tim, and I hope it's useful content for any aspiring marketers.
Good stuff. Thank you so much.